Welcome back. This is part two of heat, altitude, and humidity. And today we're going to focus on heat. So let's start with the end in mind. What is the goal of heat prep? Now, for most of us, it is going to be to run well in the heat. Or if we have a hot race coming up and we're a cyclist, it'll be to ride well in the heat. Or if we're going to be swimming in some hot water, swim well in the heat. So start with the end in mind. I think if you do that, it will keep your approach more reasonable. Some of the techniques that you'll come across that elites and ultra athletes use in their own training will absolutely ruin you if you try them. And I'm talking about things like 45-minute extreme saunas straight after a run, or putting on a heat suit and going for a 20-mile run, or riding for 3 hours in a room that's 40 degrees centigrade. I've come across all of these recently, and I would not recommend them to you. What I would recommend you do is think about what's going to be required for you to perform in the heat. A couple things for you. First off, one of the nice adaptations that happens with exposure to heat is we are going to start sweating more quickly. Our sweat is going to become more dilute. And those are very positive adaptations. And they happen relatively quickly when we're exposed to heat and exercising in the heat. Another adaptation that we're going to need is the ability to uptake fluids while moving. And that can be a really challenging thing for people that aren't used to drinking a lot when they run. And what you can do is you can start by drinking a lot when you're sitting in the sauna, or drinking a lot when you're on the bike, and then progress to being able to drink a lot while running and getting comfortable with that sensation of running around with a full gut. At the beginning, it's going to feel like you're sloshing around. But as you get used to it, it'll just feel like you're full. And your stomach's going to empty better if you're relatively full. If you're just taking little sips and hoping that they all clear through, that's not going to be the best way for you to keep yourself hydrated. So keep that in mind. The other thing I've found is training's number one. I mentioned that in part one. So for your heat preparation, you don't want the heat to interfere with the adaptations, the training adaptations. So you need to be clear with yourself what you're trying to achieve with the session. I'll give you an example. If it's a heat, if it's like, hey, I want to get some heat prep, I want to get some experience drinking fluids at a high rate, then if it's really hot out, or if you're going to wear a lot of clothes to simulate that heat, you don't need to be going as hard. You'll find you can get the heat adaptation at lower relative effort levels. And your heart rate will be a good indication for that. If your heart rate starts ramping up big time, you know you need to back off, because that's a sign of the heat stress kind of doing its work for you. Separate from that, let's say you live in Texas, southern Spain, someplace where it's really warm. When I lived and trained in Hong Kong for my key sessions, I was a heat avoider, meaning I knew I was getting enough heat prep just from daily living and the easy sessions when I would go out in the heat, that I didn't need to go looking for extra stress. And that's an important thing for you to remember. So there's the training adaptation workouts and there's the heat workouts. You don't necessarily want to be combining them until you are very well adapted. And you will find out quickly if you try it and you're not adapted. You'll see heart rate rising, your subjective perception is going to rise. You're not going to have a very good workout. You're going to extend your recovery. It's not going to work well for you. Now, talk a little bit about active versus passive. I use passive heat because I don't live in a very hot spot for most of the year. So I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and most days I want to hit max sweat rate for 10 minutes. And that means about usually a 15 to 20 minute sauna. And that gives me, kind of keeps me topped up from a heat point of view. So when it does get hot outside and I go outside and do some hot training, I'm ready to go. I don't have the big heart rate spike that many of us experience on the first couple hot days of the year. Now, for active heat prep, you have many different options. You can wear a wetsuit in the water. You can use no fan training indoors. I've got a arc trainer, which is kind of like a cross trainer. It's an elliptical with arms. I've got an indoor bike trainer, and I've got a treadmill. And if I work out on those at a moderate, easy to moderate effort with no fan, my body temperature will come up and I will get a really good sweat going on. And that's not with extra clothes. If I started putting on extra clothes, I could get a great sweat going. And that's exactly what I used to do in the southern island of New Zealand when I was training for Ultraman. I would bundle up, put a toque on, and long sleeve jersey, gloves, track pants, the whole thing. Back then we didn't have heat suits and we weren't running around with garbage bags like we were wrestlers trying to make weight. But what we did do is we would wear a lot of clothes and we would just go outside and do an endurance run. And we would carry extra fluids so we could train both the intake and the high sweat rate, and our muscles get used to exercising when they're very warm. Another thing for you to think about, body type. What's your build? And what I mean by this is, how lean are your limbs? If you're thinking about skin folds on your arms and on your thighs, if you're putting on weight, I tend to put on weight in my torso and my limbs stay relatively lean. Now I've got friends, some of whom are very powerful, who put weight on whole body. And what that means is they tend to hold heat in their legs, and they tend to hold heat generally much more than someone with my build. If we take my build, make it more extreme, stretch me out a bit, have me look more like a very tall elite runner or elite triathlete, I call it the paperclip build, those athletes can be very good at dumping heat, particularly if they are lean as well as built like a paperclip. And they can train to race in very hot, very demanding conditions. If you don't have that build, then you will be better off selecting key races that fit your particular morphology. So in other words, you might have a strength of operating great in temperatures that the paperclip people find way too cold. And so think about that. Don't try and force yourself into a situation that is really difficult for you given your natural makeup. Now you can change that makeup over time. Training and exposure to conditions will change our bodies, but it does take time for that to happen. And while you're doing that, there's no point in fighting it. Likewise, if you live in a very hot, very extreme environment, what you will tend to find is your natural peak is late spring, early summer, and your off season should be done in the hottest part of the year, which will be very different from your friends and competitors who are living in temperate climates. You will be ahead of the curve come late spring, and you can really capitalize on that if you aim for a peak in that window where you know that you're going to have better heat prep and you're just going to have better endurance than your competition. That's something I found in Hong Kong. I could come over from my hot environment early summer and race really well in the United States. I did that a couple times. There's some other nuances that I want to get into, but I'm going to save that for the humidity section, because wet heat, the kind we get in the tropics, is very different from the dry heat that you'll be experiencing mostly in your races. Thanks for listening. Hope this helps.